Welcome to Innovate Extreme.
We are excited to welcome Eric Frazer, a tech enthusiast with a unique career trajectory that's taken him from a software development to sales through management and then back into tech sphere with a focus on generative AI. Eric's initial foray into machine learning in the 2010s laid the groundwork for his current passion, which he's been pursuing since mid 2023. His diverse experience offers a rare blend of technical skill, business acumen, and visionary insight into the future of AI technologies. So, hi Eric, how are you doing today?
Hello. Hi, very nice to be here.
So, Eric, as you are a technical management and sales all packed into one, so I think you would be a great asset to the organization that you have been working for. So, can you share a bit about your journey into the world of AI and what inspired you to focus on this area?
Yeah, absolutely. So I first got exposed to machine learning, which is a type of AI, in the mid 2010s, and I thought it was really interesting. When I was in university or college, that type of math was being taught, but we also were told, no one's going to be able to run this at scale because computers are just too expensive. And back when I was in university, that was true. But now computing is very cheap compared to back then. So you can run this type of math at scale. Um, and it was really interesting for me to find out just how cheap it was to do it in the mid 2010s. I also met my current mentor, Dr. Lisa Palmer, who is a PhD in this field. And when she started her own business, being an AI consultant, I was really interested and basically found my way to joining her um, in a mentor student kind of relationship where she teaches me and I learn as much as I can, as fast as I can about generative AI, which is, of course, the really popular type of AI nowadays.
Yeah, thanks for that, Eric. Yeah, actually, I've been impressed with your mentor also, and I have been following her too on LinkedIn. And but your post, she is not that frequent on LinkedIn, but you are posting really knowledgeable for stuff on your posts. So, for our listeners who might be new to AI, how would you explain AI in layman's terms?
I like first of all, there's a lot of different definitions. So my favorite one is from Stanford University because Stanford is where the term artificial intelligence was originally coined in the 1950s.
Okay.
And so they have a very broad definition, which is basically it is the science and engineering of making intelligent machines. And then more recently, that's been refined to add things like making machines that can do what humans or only humans could previously do. So it's a very broad
Okay.
definition and it includes machine learning and deep learning.
Okay. Okay. So, how is machine learning and deep learning are different? Can you explain that?
Sure, yeah. So deep learning is a type of machine learning, but machine learning is essentially where you program a machine to be able to learn from just absorbing data. So rather than say, for example, hey, when you see a red light, hit the brakes in the car. Machine learning would be observe what all of the other drivers are doing. And then this machine would realize that, oh, I see. So when this red light happens, everyone makes the car stop. And then it would use that data to understand when I see a red light, I'm supposed to stop too. So that would be machine learning versus just a rule-based system where you say red light means hit the brakes.
Okay.
And then deep learning is a type of machine learning where you're using something called a neural network. And the word deep is used because there's lots of layers in the neural network. So ChatGPT-3, for example, has 96 layers, which all interact with each other in a similar way to the way that neurons in the brain interact with each other, but only in a very simple sort of simulation of that.
Okay, that's interesting. So there are some of the biggest misconceptions about AI in industrial sector, that they are going to take their jobs away and AI can be used for evil. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think that some manual tasks might be replaced by AI or robotics, but that's actually been happening for decades now. So if you think of what happened when we started automating factories, and more recently when we started automating very large distribution centers, we've been replacing human labor with machines. And so it's not something that just started happening. It's something that's been happening for decades. It continues to happen as the technology itself gets better. So now, people are very used to the idea that moving a heavy piece of machinery or a heavy object in a warehouse is probably going to be done by a machine, not a human. And now things like filling out a spreadsheet, that can be done by AI instead of humans. So if, for example, you're in sales and your boss says, "Hey, I want a spreadsheet of, all of your current deals and the probability that they're going to close this quarter." Well, that's something that an AI can do, so you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
So there are going to be some tasks, but I think there is also a lot of fear about people being completely replaced that probably isn't necessary, meaning there's a lot of things where people think, I'm going to be completely replaced by AI, but in fact, they're going to be needed. They're just going to have to do something different to what they're doing now.
Mhm. Yeah, actually, most of the programmers are scared by seeing what ChatGPT can do. So,
Yeah,
what I think is that they have to upgrade themselves. They have to, as most of the influencer on LinkedIn say, that you master AI before it masters you. So we have to keep up the pace in order to become irreplaceable.
yeah, I think that's a good approach, is understand it, get closer to it, don't run away from it, actually get closer to it and study it. And you might find if you're a professional like a lawyer or a pharmacist or a doctor or a teacher, you might find that you don't see a machine that can replace you, you can see a machine that can help you.
Yeah, actually, I have a different take here. Actually, my wife is a lawyer, and I try to scare her to from the AI applications. So I always tell to her that upgrade yourself, learn AI before you become irreplaceable. Uh, AI is gonna take away all the jobs. That's just a joke that I play with her. So
That's
even I think, yeah, please continue.
I was going to say that's interesting because I think that first of all, law is not something that I have any expertise in, but what lawyers who I've spoken to tell me is that even the best legal AI isn't really ready to replace a good human lawyer. So I don't know whether your wife feels that way as well, but it sounds to me like even the cutting edge legal AI, it still needs to be supervised or reviewed
Mm.
by a good lawyer, a human lawyer.
Yeah, actually, not argument cannot be done by an AI, but I was thinking more of an approach that filing a case, understanding mediation, these low level factors, because in India, the legal system is overwhelmed with the cases. There are like
Ah,
100 times cases than the capacity of the current legal system. So
that's
replacing
that's a good
menial tasks.
opportunity.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I was also thinking. But I'm trying to convince her to help me create an AI regarding this, but she's not totally convinced and she is not helping me out.
She's probably going to win that argument.
Yeah, she's a lawyer. What are the realistic applications that you can think that can be used for AI in industries such as manufacturing?
Yeah, in manufacturing, I think that one of the biggest opportunities is to consume all of the data that modern machinery throws off while it's operating. So if you install, let's say, just a really simple industrial elevator, um, that elevator is going to throw off tons and tons of data. Um, it's sometimes referred to as IoT data or Internet of Things. So it's essentially data that is describing its own operation. And there's already been a use of a lot of IoT data to discover things about machinery, like when should I replace a particular part in this machine? So um, even in the 2010s, we already had software that was sorting through this data, trying to look for patterns that would tell it things like, you should replace this component in the next 6 weeks, otherwise the machine will break and you'll have, a broken machine on your hands. Um,
Mhm.
so I think that as the AI gets better, it can go through that same IoT data and make better and more insightful and more correct recommendations. So that's what I think one of the biggest opportunities for AI use is in manufacturing. I think that manufacturing companies probably also have a lot of administrivia that could probably be automated by AI.
Okay, okay. Yeah, regarding the maturity of AI, like you said that as AI will improve, so most of the business are jumping into implementing AI into their enterprise. But do you think this is the right time, or should we wait before AI gets more mature because of the concepts like hallucinations are happening? We don't want that to happen in a real business scenario.
Yeah, I think that it is a good time to run what I would call safe, low risk pilot projects. Meaning, if you built a small AI solution that, let's say, you have a company of 1,000 people and you just test it out by giving it to 50 people just to see what happens, and you put guardrails around it so that it does not do things like sell an airline seat for $2 when the minimum
Mhm.
price for that seat really should be $200. So you make sure you put guardrails around it, you pilot it, and you observe. I think it's a good time to do that type of project. If you have a bigger budget, like Wells Fargo, for example, have gone all in on generative AI, and they're using a model from Meta, Facebook's parent company, called
Mhm.
Llama, and they're going to use that as a foundation model for building bots and agents. Some of those bots and agents will be just inside the walls of Wells Fargo and they'll be used by Wells Fargo employees. And some of them might actually start interacting with Wells Fargo customers. But
Okay.
because they have such a big budget, they can also spend money on making sure that the controls of that system are good enough that a bot will never say to a commercial banking customer, for example, "Oh, I'm going to pull your line of credit." That should not be a
Mhm.
message that gets told to any commercial banking customer through a bot. Um, and I'm sure that Wells Fargo are smart enough and have well funded their project enough that they won't do that.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, like right amount of experts and right quality of experts are required when implementing AI.
Right, right,
So what?
exactly.
So what do you think about importance of data? Actually, I have seen many cases where companies want to implement AI, but they do not have data. So
Yeah,
what
yeah.
should be the approach then?
Absolutely. That's absolutely critical. So, if they really want to do something with AI, but they're not confident in their data, then they should spend the first efforts just examining and cleaning their data and getting very clear on what economic benefit they're trying to get from the AI, and then going backwards and saying, okay, well, if we want the AI to do that, what data will it need? and making sure that that data is very reliable and that there's enough of it. So
Yeah,
AIs typically they need lots of data and they need the data to be reliable. If they don't have enough data, they don't work very well. And if the data is not very accurate, then they can actually start giving you very bad advice.
yeah. Actually, it's the simplest rule of programming: garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true.
So, now I want to talk about like privacy concerns that they are in work of AI. Like recently, Meera Murati of OpenAI, the CTO, they said that
Yes,
they. So, how can we address the challenges of privacy? That what kind of data AI is consuming, and whether the sense privacy concerns like personal information is not given to AI that can be used later by malicious intent
right.
people.
Well, just as an individual or as an employee, what I would advise is always be very conscious of what you're uploading into an AI. So, for example, ChatGPT lets you upload files to create these things called custom GPTs, which are essentially little chatbots that you can make specialized in particular topics. Now, in order to train them on those topics, you typically upload a bunch of files. Just be really careful about which files you upload and what's in them. I would not, for example, upload any files that contain personal information, um, even things about where I live and just data that can be used by any sort of identity thieves. I probably would not upload to an AI. Um, and then more broadly, I think that the system is working. It looks a little clumsy and a little slow, but what I mean by that is lawsuits are actually being brought by people like the New York Times saying, hey, OpenAI, you weren't allowed to use our journalism that way, but you did. So now we're going to sue you. And that is, I believe, that is the system working as designed. It's a little clunky and it's a little slow, but I think people know that there has been a very aggressive approach taken by the AI companies like OpenAI and Meta when they and Google when they decide to hoover up as much data as possible without very much attention paid to, did we actually pay for this or are we allowed to use this data this way? I think they weren't very concerned about that question. They just thought, let's just get the data as much as possible and we'll ask for forgiveness later. So their priority
Mhm.
was to get the data and train their model. Now they've done that, and some of the people who created that data, like the New York Times, are saying, wait a minute, we never agreed to that. And so these lawsuits are the system working as designed. And I think in several months, there will probably be more clarity about what's allowed and what's not allowed when it comes to the use of data training an AI model.
Okay.
Also, as an
Yeah.
individual, pay attention to the terms and conditions. Most of the big AI companies do make promises now that we are not going to use your data to train our models. So
Mhm.
when you create a custom GPT, one of the things that OpenAI promises you is whatever you upload in here, we're not going to use it to train our model. It will only be used for your little custom model. So that's a promise they
Okay.
make. Now, what they're doing behind the scenes, of course, we don't know, but at least they're
Yeah.
making that promise.
Yes. So, as a society, like uh, they are training AI by using data from third parties without their consent, and that is actually a little concerning for me because Google has all the access to all the websites. So,
It sure does. Yeah.
so that is the reason that I'm a bit afraid when talking to AI because sometimes when the AI agent that is there, suppose it's ChatGPT, if I ask it to create an image, sometimes it will say, being a text-based model, I won't be able to create any image. But if I reprompt it and say that no, you can do it, then it will create. So the
Yeah,
agent is also is having a mind of its own. So that's
yeah.
what
I
happened.
think it's smart to be concerned about this. Because the industry is still working out what is acceptable and what is not. So that behavior that you just described, where if you simply rewrite the prompt, you can get it to do things that it initially said no. And you just reword the prompt, and suddenly it says, oh, okay, I'll do it then. And that isn't, necessarily comforting for a lot of people. Um, so I think that the way I've approached that is to ask, okay, why? Why did it say yes the second or third time I asked? Why didn't it just say yes the first time? And what is it that makes it say yes when at first it said no? And so I've personally found it clarifying and reassuring to understand why the model behaves like that. And it's because of the nature of neural networks, essentially. These are essentially big probability calculators. And so they're not exact and deterministic, meaning that they don't have these hard and fast rules saying never draw a picture of a black Viking. Like that is not a rule. So you might say, draw me a picture of a Viking, um, and it will go into its training data and it'll notice that most of the Vikings are, Nordic people. So you'll get a picture of a Nordic person. And then you might say, okay, I would like a picture of a black Viking. And it's it's probably going to do that unless it has a policy of, for some reason it doesn't want to do it. Um, but it's working on probabilities. It's not working on rules. It's working by looking at training data saying, okay, well, of the million pictures that I see of Vikings, almost all of them are Nordic people. So I'm just going to draw a picture of a Nordic person.
Mm. Yeah.
But there's still a non-zero probability that it will draw a picture of a black woman Viking because it's
Yeah.
probabilistic. It's not deterministic.
Okay. 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 So coming back to the industry and business, what measures can company take to ensure a smooth transition for their employees into more AI integrated roles? Because most of the employees are scared of AI
Yeah.
because of the learning curve or something. They are not technically that
Yeah.
inclined to learn those things. So how
That's
we
a
can?
really big, yeah, it's a big issue. I think the word you use there, that's the most important word, is afraid and fear. So there is fear. People are afraid of this. And I think that a good employer addresses the fear through communication, honest communication. So if that employer has a real plan to replace some jobs with automation, I believe that the morally right thing to do is to be honest about that plan. So don't
Yeah,
lie to people
actually.
and say, "Oh, don't worry, you'll never be replaced." I mean, if you really plan to
Mhm.
replace them, you should tell them as far in advance as possible, so that they can have some window of adjustment and reaction, and they can make their own plans about what they're going to do next. But more than that, I think that you can um, you can make the fear worse if you don't communicate with the employees. So I would err towards the side of almost over communicating and saying, this is what we're planning to do with AI. This is why we want to do it. And so that means that these jobs, there will be AI introduced into the roles, but the roles won't be replaced. So, whatever that plan really is, my encouragement is to be very honest about what the plan is, to communicate it as soon as possible, to be honest about what you're not certain of as an employer, um,
Mhm.
and to also address where the fear comes from. So if the fear comes from, look, you're making me feel like I might lose my job, and that means I might lose my house, and this is horrible for me, that's why I'm afraid, then I think a good employer engages their employees at that level and says, okay, well, I don't want you to be afraid. I want you to feel like you have a place here. Let me tell you what the honest plan is in relation to your role.
Yes, exactly. Actually, I would like to give an example here. One of my friend was working for a backend process for a UK based bank. So the his process was going to be automated. So the bank management told him that your process is going to be automated and we'll be transitioning you to another role. So he
Right.
helped the AI team to get the best out of the process, and the automation was really a success, and he was transitioned into another role. But if the goal of company is to cut the cost by using AI, then it might be hard for them to keep employees who are being transitioned.
Realistically, yes. I mean, I like the way that your friend's employer did that, where first of all, they were open about what they were doing, then they made an effort to find another role for your friend, and they let your friend be involved in the transition. It sounds like his knowledge was actually pretty important to making the automation good. Um,
Mhm.
and I feel like that's probably going to happen at many companies. Some companies will be aiming to reduce their headcount. Um, those companies, I mean, if there are just automatable tasks and they just don't need people to do them anymore, that's probably going to happen. I would encourage them, though, to think about the um, the bigger picture, right? Like, let's say that you have 700 employees and you think, you know what, I could lose 100 employees and just automate everything that they do. Well, what does that do to the experience of the 600 employees that are left? So you
Mhm.
might think, oh, it's really great to save so much money and get rid of 100 employees. But if the other 600 employees become miserable and frightened, you might have done more damage to your company than you realize.
Yeah, that's what happened with the Twitter fiasco that Elon Musk started few years back.
Yeah, right. That's a really good example of what can happen. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what emerging AI technologies are you most excited about for the future?
So this is a
Is
little bit technical, but there
Mhm.
is one that I think is very interesting and potentially very important, which is that the Microsoft research team recently found a way to shrink the really big AI models that we're using, like ChatGPT 4 is an enormous model.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and it would be better for everyone if these models were just as powerful but much smaller, because then they would use a lot less electricity.
Yes,
And
exactly.
physically, you could start putting them in more places. Like right now, that model is so big that it has to run in a data center. So if you are not connected to the internet, too bad for you.
Mhm.
You don't get to experience the model. But what if the model was small enough that you could put it on your phone? So even when you
Mhm.
didn't have any internet, let's say you go camping, you're in the middle of the desert or something, there's no internet, well, you could still have AI if it's running on your phone. But the model has to be small enough to put on a phone. So
Yeah.
Microsoft Research recently came up with a discovery that if you use a certain method for shrinking the model will still be smart enough. And I thought that was a remarkable discovery, and it could save the world a lot of electricity. It could increase access to AI for people in general. So you may not need an internet connection to experience AI if you use this sort of approach. And I think that type of thing, where it's got a social reach impact and it's got an environmental impact, they're really interesting to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, actually, I was not aware of this advancement, and actually, I'm also excited about it because I read it somewhere. The amount of electricity required for creating an image using an AI is almost the same it takes to charge a phone. So
Yeah, yeah,
sustainability
I'm
is
really
also
glad you
important.
brought that up because, I know it's fun to ask an AI to make a picture of your cat, riding a horse or something, whatever is fun for you. That's great, but no one understands how much electricity it's using.
Yeah,
Um, and I think it's good to pay attention to the environmental impact of these enormous AI systems.
yeah. So I have taken almost all the time that we had. So I want to ask a few more questions. Like, do you have any advice for aspiring AI professionals that what skills and knowledge would you recommend to focus on?
Sure. Yeah. So this is my personal point of view. I myself had to go back and learn much more about the math of AI, and that's what made me feel comfortable that I started understanding it really. So I don't think I would feel as comfortable talking about AI and what's likely to be in the future of AI unless I had studied the math. So my personal advice is um, if you like math and it's not painful for you to study it, I highly encourage you to study the math of AI. There's lots of free learning online now about the math of generative AI specifically.
Okay, yeah. Actually, when I started getting into AI, math was not my favorite subject in the school, but I tried. And there are really good courses available online which can explain what in a way that our teachers were not able to do when we were kids.
Yeah,
So,
I noticed that too. I mean, I was taught math, a long time ago, probably quite traditionally, like rote learning, like learn this formula, memorize it, and then in the
yeah.
exam they ask you, what is this formula? Prove that you know it, use the formula to do this. It's very much rote learning. Whereas now, if I go online, I notice that a lot of the education is much better because it's connected to real examples, and it's visualized in a way that you're watching a short video of this is the effect of you know applying a cosine similarity algorithm to some data in an AI. It's much more visual. Um, it's connected to a real life issue that you probably care about. Like, for example, when I was taught trigonometry, I mean, it was kind of interesting, but now when you learn things like cosine similarity, you're learning it in the context that this is how the AI can analyze a contract, right? So we were talking about law before. You could ask an
Mhm.
AI, hey, take this 50-page contract, which might be for the sale of a building, and tell me what are the biggest legal risks that I have if the sale falls through. And the AI
Okay.
can do things like that. And it's going to use something called cosine similarity to do it. And so when you know that that's what it's doing with cosine similarity, suddenly it becomes much more interesting. Okay, what is cosine similarity? How is this working? Because if
Okay.
it's going to result in me getting legal advice on whether this contract is dangerous to me or not, now I'm very interested.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I have not got into cosine similarity, so I cannot comment on that. But even I feel that the more we learn about the basics, then only we should be moving on to the advanced topics. So maths is the fundamental thing that we have to learn first before we jump into AI and machine learning.
I think so. I think it's really it's been clarifying for me anyway. Just my own experience is studying the math is what made it clear for me, much more
Okay.
than reading the Python code, which of course is also very helpful, but the math was what really unlocked it for me in my head.
So, at the end, I just want to ask, are there any resources that you suggest for those who are interested in AI?
Sure, honestly, I would just start with YouTube and just do really
Okay.
simple YouTube searches like Introduction to Neural Networks or Introduction to Neural Network Math. Or even,
Okay.
if you're really brand new, Introduction to AI, and then just follow the branch of your own curiosity.
Mhm.
Because if you were to say Introduction to AI, you'll get a lot of different types of videos. Pick the ones that are most compelling to you. At some point, you will be directed along a branch that points towards some math and probably the math of neural networking. And there's lots of really good introductory videos. I will mention one person who has recently made a series of 90-second to 2-minute videos, and
Okay.
that's Sadie St. Lawrence. And
Uh,
I watched some of these videos and I thought that is really well done because she's making it very consumable. It's only 90 seconds to 2 minutes. If you're interested in
Mm.
more detail, you can take what you see in that 90 seconds and you can find some other video to, or maybe a research paper or something to explain it. But Sadie's short videos are really good introductions. And you can
Okay.
find them just by, you can probably just Google Sadie St. Lawrence AI, or you can find her on LinkedIn, and she's posted links to her videos there. And she has a YouTube channel.
Okay. I'll definitely look into it. Thanks for sharing that. So
No
finally,
worries.
if there is one takeaway you'd like our listener to have about AI, so what would it be?
I would say um, if you're worried about it, the answer is probably to get closer and study it instead of run away from it. I know that it might feel much more natural to just try to shut it out of your life, but actually, I think your fear will go down when you study it.
Okay, that's a really good takeaway. Uh, and thanks for attending my podcast, Eric.
It's a
I
pleasure.
believe that you are a very busy person, and you took time out of your busy schedule and came here to educate the community. Thanks for that.
Thank you for
And
inviting me. It's a pleasure. And I hope everyone got something out of this, and I'm happy to help.
thanks a lot, Eric.
Thank you.